Welcome back to the Health Revival Show. You all know that I love talking about mold and mycotoxin illness because nobody believes that it's as big of a deal as it is. So we have an expert today, Seth Jones. He's the founder and CEO of Super Stratum, which is a super cool name. And we're going to talk all things building related illness. So welcome, Seth, to the show. Let our listeners know who you are, why you founded Super Stratum, and a little bit about your story.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I always love having these conversations, especially with people who have some awareness of how large the problem is and how unaddressed it is. My story kind of into superstratum is a little non-traditional. I was in music and entertainment for about 15 years. So I was living in Los Angeles at the time. Um, I I had done many things throughout my career in terms of I was a songwriter and a producer, and then I wound up in the electronic music scene. I was a DJ for a number of years, and that's actually what I was doing while I was living in a home unknowingly that was full of mold and mycotoxins. Um, Unrelated to that, I decided to start a company that eventually would go on to solve that problem and present a solution. But at the time, those two things had not connected for me, and they actually didn't connect for many years later. So Superstratum started when I met a chemist who had a very interesting background. He had worked at Sherwin-Williams in paints and coatings, particularly working with non-toxic paints for children. And he retired. He moved up into the mountains in Georgia, and he started getting algae growing on the side of his home. So he developed a very unique polymer technology that at the time I knew nothing about mold. I knew nothing about chemicals or chemical manufacturing or cleaning or, I was a single bachelor living in LA. So I certainly didn't know much about cleaning. But there was enough interest in this product. They were making some very wild claims, that this invisible water resistant coating could be sprayed onto anything and it would prevent mold, or it would rather resist mold for upwards of 20 years. And that was a wild claim. I knew nothing about it, but I'm originally from Louisiana. So I grew up around humidity and moisture and mold. And I thought to myself, well, if even half of what he's saying is true, this is a really big deal. And sure enough, we really investigated that product and found that it was true. So we started the company, we purchased that IP, and that became what is now our endurance coating. So that's our flagship product. That really started the company. And we, when we first found this product and launched the company, we thought to ourselves, okay, well, we have a solution for mold. So let's go take it to the mold remediators and all the people who were trying to get rid of mold. And very quickly, we found out, oh, maybe this entire industry that's based on removing mold doesn't actually want a permanent solution to that problem.
Mm.
And there were other reasons as well. Of course, it's a legacy industry. It's been bought up, by large private equity groups. It has essentially now become a commodity service industry. Any remediator you call is using the same products. They're doing the same things. There's not much innovation. And like I said, I didn't know much about mold at that time, but we had some friends who had gotten very sick from mold. So I knew enough to know that there was a big problem, that the remediation tactics and the ways that people would go about addressing the problem really didn't solve it for a large cohort of the population. So that really began Superstratum. And as we kind of moved into that space, my main business partner is a very brilliant chemist, and had been in all sorts of chemical manufacturing and building science. And when we kind of discovered this together, we said, well, we actually think that there's another problem going on. And that was the mycotoxin problem. Now, to just jump right in here, it sounds like you both understand the difference between mold and mycotoxins, but mold is a living organism, and most people know that it can make us sick and do those types of things. But mycotoxins are actually a chemical, right? Think of it like I like to describe them as landmines, right? They're the weapons that the mold uses to fight its own enemies in its environment. Those enemies are primarily bacteria, and that's why we use mycotoxins like penicillin and mycophenolic acid and other antibiotics to fight bacteria even within our own body. Because for humans, historically, bacteria is really the main enemy. That's what makes us sick. We haven't always been in this, I'll call it improper relationship with mold, right? So what we're suffering from in modern buildings is actually collateral damage from this microbial war that's going on in these homes. And we'll talk a little bit about that and what creates that. But when we realized this, we said, wait a minute, you have a whole industry, mold remediation, microbiologists. They're focused on living organisms. How do you kill, remove, stop the growth of living organisms? But no one is addressing the chemical poison that that mold has left behind in that building. And we were a little bit different because our company comes from the chemistry side, right? So we saw what was going on with the mycotoxins themselves and really set out to solve that. And that's what Super Stratum is. It is a solution not for the mold, but for the mycotoxins that are left behind in that environment. So it's becoming very popular now and very well known to do small particle cleans after mold remediation. Once you remediate the mold, in these modern airtight buildings, that whole building is contaminated by additional mold spores, by mycotoxins, other VOCs, things like that. And there was no solution for that. So that is what superstratum is. It is pairing the right cleaning protocols and procedures with the right chemicals that will not only, clean the dust and remove, but will actually break down the chemical toxin that's in that environment.
So cool. And I think just for the listener out there, so when we think about mycotoxins, I mean, they're odorless generally, right? Like you're not going to see them. And what I've learned in terms of mold, for example, if you were, as I was taught when I was growing up, to hit mold with bleach, which is the worst thing that you could do,
Worst thing.
that is going to release all of these other mycotoxins because what you said before is very true that it's competing with other bacteria in the environment. And so recognizing that even as we'll get into when you are cleaning things, you want to be equipped. Like I wear gloves when I'm going to do any type of cleaning, or if I see something visibly, then I'm going to put on a mask and these types of kind of protective equipment to work on cleaning that area. But it's not just that area. Just because you remove mold maybe from the shower or the windowsill doesn't mean that those mycotoxins and those spores haven't gone into the air, and that's what's making people sick because that's what they're breathing in all the time. And so you also mentioned something about, the airtight buildings that we live in. Talk to the listener who says, well, yeah, we had, you know, some water damage and we remediated it all and everything's good. And they don't think that they have to do anything, further in terms of treatment, not realizing like I talk a lot about and Becca does as well, indoor air quality. Getting good quality, air doctor or whatever Jasper it might be that you want in your homes because our indoor air quality is actually worse in some cases than outdoor because
Yeah,
these things are so tight. So talk to that person because I think so many people will say like, well, yeah, it's just not a big deal. I don't see anything. I don't smell anything. You don't have to have that real musty, smell. But let's talk a little bit about how these new homes and, the tightness is actually more harmful and we're not immune to these things happening in like a brand new space.
absolutely. Well, it's a little kind of contrary to your own intuition, which is, we think, oh, technology and new buildings, these things are getting better. They're actually getting worse.
Mm.
And the reason they're getting worse is because in the 70s, when we had the energy, the oil embargoes and the crisis that happened, our energy changed, right? We realized, okay, it's not always readily available and it's not always cheap. So our entire economy shifted to conserve energy. And that's when the rise in energy efficient buildings began through the 80s, particularly into the 90s and the early 2000s. And in the 80s and 90s, HVAC became commonplace, right? So what happened is we began to build tighter buildings and we began to put ductwork in all of our buildings. So those two things together created a problem. When you seal up a building, and you'll see this when you see homes being built, right? You see Tyvek wrap or a vapor barrier put around that building. That's to keep conditioned air into the building. We seal up those windows because we don't want that air to escape. Now, that does a good job of keeping energy costs low, but there's a trade off, right? Because we're trapping that air inside the building. And most people, I say to people like this: if you imagine, just assume that your building has toxic air, And the only way that that air gets flushed out of the building is when you enter and leave that building 3 or 4 times a day. Think how long that air is staying in that building and being circulated. And if your HVAC system, which is extremely common today, has some type of mold growth, most people never even thought about cleaning their HVAC systems, right? And that's something you should do every couple of years. But if you've got that mold growing in that HVAC system, what we now know is mold will release mycotoxins into the air. And there are studies that show this. This was completely unknown until a few years ago. And it was really the theory that we had at the time that drove, our research into trying to solve this problem. We said, okay, wait a minute. All of these doctors, all of these people in the health space who are beginning to recognize this problem of mycotoxins, they're only focused on the food. And mycotoxins have been heavily studied within agriculture and food because they get into our food and they cause problems when you ingest them. But to your point about air quality, I always like to say it's a little crude, but if you want to get a chemical into your body, what's the best way to do it, right? You smoke it, you breathe it into your lungs. So that's what had been happening for years and years. And it was unknown, right? Because there was no way to test for mycotoxins. Traditional mold tests don't test for them. And mold and mycotoxins are separate. Mycotoxins can exist in an environment long after the mold has been gone. And in many cases, when remediators come in and remediate mold, or when you spray that bleach on mold, it's encouraging that mold to release mycotoxins into the environment. So that's the real problem. You combine modern homes, moisture gets into every home. 98% of all basements flood in the homeowner's lifetime, right? We all have moisture in our home. We probably all have mold. I mean, the United States government says anywhere from 50 to 70% of our buildings have ongoing water damage issues, right? And these are the conditions that generate mycotoxins. So you put all this together, and what we're now living in is a modern building that's airtight. That moisture now can't escape that building envelope. That mold grows, it releases the toxins into the air, and your HVAC system circulates it. And you're exactly right. They're completely odorless, and they're far too small to be caught by any type of filter. Mold spores, the smallest mold spore can be 3 microns in size. You're talking about a tenth of a micron. These are nanoparticles, right? So you can't filter them out of your environment. Traditional chemicals that kill mold, like hydrogen peroxides, peracetic acids, even quaternary ammonium salts, more toxic chemicals, they will kill the mold spore, but they don't destroy the chemical. And that has been the problem. You can clean and remediate all you want, but if you are in that large cohort of people who are sensitive to toxins or who have a prior exposure or, are dealing with autoimmune disease or chronic inflammation, you are extremely susceptible in that environment. And traditional remediation is most often not enough.
So, for the person that maybe has seen mold and thought that they remediated the mold and went through the process, which, when done properly, we know it's not a very cheap process, how would you recommend for them to go and test or monitor if there are mycotoxins lingering? Or, how do you guys recommend doing that? I know that you guys are mostly products and the support for the mycotoxin remediation, but what do you recommend for someone that suspects this might be going on in their house?
Yeah, we're in an interesting spot right now, because there are not any reliable mycotoxin air tests currently available. There are a couple of surface tests. We have a surface test. We actually have the only surface test that uses mass chromatography or liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry. So that's a certain way of analyzing the molecular weight of chemicals. It eliminates false positives that can appear with cheaper PCR based testing. Because this is something a lot of people don't know. And I like to tell people this so that they can kind of understand the insanity. But if you want to study a mycotoxin in a lab, right? And we've done this, we've done our own research, we've proven we have the only products that are proven to destroy these chemicals. But in order to do that, that lab has to be a level 1 biolab, which means there are background checks with the DoD and the government. And those controls, those toxins actually come from the Department of Defense because there are bioweapon patents on mycotoxins, which,
Funny story. I actually, sorry to interrupt, but I just have to
yeah,
share this. I was listening to another person that I, look up to in terms of their knowledge and everything. She's like, if you want to know what is truly going on in our government and the drug administration and everything. She's like, reverse engineer the drug companies because they are probably trying to just make money on what is the real problem. And she's like, and look to the military. She's like, because the military does not care about anything except for solutions. Like they will do whatever they need to take care of their people. And so I said, I just had to laugh because I was like, oh, yep, the military. We need look to the military and what they're going to be providing.
Exactly. It's so ironic that there's a chemical that's so toxic that you can't even get it from the military unless you're a level 1 biolab. Yet there are no acceptable levels. There's no monitor. It's absolutely crickets when it comes to the environments that we live in, right? So that disparity is our mission, right? It's making people aware, and this is going to take years, right, to get to this point where our buildings are actually safe, right, and we have these acceptable levels. But back to your question around testing, because there are no real dependable tests within the air, if people want to test the surfaces and the dust, they can do that. That's where most of the mycotoxins exist, is actually in the dust. So you can do a dust test. But what I like to tell people is the solution is the same, right? People know if they're sick. Most people who are testing just don't believe themselves, right? They know there's mold there. They know how they feel, but they want to see it validated somehow. Right? And that's why we created what we call our detection kit. It is not by any means a comprehensive building analysis. We made it very cost effective. It's a single mold tape and a mycotoxin swab. So that can give you some idea, especially if you have your analysis or blood work where you're looking at the body and what mycotoxins you have in your body. If you're trying to identify where the exposure is happening, it can be somewhat helpful. But if you know that building is making you sick, then you're going to do the same thing. So I usually tell people just save the money and move to the solution.
Yeah, I think the hard part is, I've had some clients that are dealing with their environment is making them sick and nobody else in the house is sick. And I've tried to explain, and we've got all kinds of pamphlets and handouts and all these things that genetically, about 24% of the population, they are going to be really, really sick from this while everybody else is fine. Right. And a lot of this comes down to, how their body's handling things, their immune system, their drainage and detoxification pathways. And then a big conversation we also have is that it doesn't have to be just like an overnight thing. We're not looking at like allergies here. It can be the buildup and the accumulation that now the body just cannot handle this anymore. And a couple of really telltale indications are chronic fatigue and horrible brain fog. Obviously, there's a lot of other symptoms, a whole host of other symptoms that can happen. And if you read books like Break the Mold and, all these other things, like, okay, everybody has this in some way, shape, or form, but really it's about a quarter of the population that I've seen in the research that just cannot handle this. And so if you're listening right now and you're like, wow, I think that's me, then you might need to or want to do some testing in your environment because you have to either prove or show to the person, that maybe you're living with, we got to get out of here, or we got to really get somebody in here to inspect and, kind of go through the whole remediation process if necessary. Or for some of my clients, having to move out of their house or or get rid of all their things because mold can be in mycotoxins, mattresses, behind picture frames. We've seen people with that, like photo albums, all these kind of crazy things. And obviously those are some real extreme cases, but some people don't recognize that this building related illness can be very serious and life threatening. Even for some individuals. I was actually chatting with an allergist I took my son to, and I was just asking him, hey, I'm just curious, conventional medicine, like, what are your thoughts? And he goes, oh, I do all kinds of mold testing here because I see it a lot with firefighters, right? Going into these places that are exposed to, maybe they're not living there, but they're exposed to all these different types of, buildings or whatnot. And, just thinking about our population as a whole, why we're so sick, I don't think we can say it's always just the mold, right? It's the accumulation of other things. So I love that you guys have affordable solutions too, because again, as Becca was saying, it can be tens of thousands of dollars. Um, so let's talk a little bit about, we have the solution now, right? We have cleaning. Obviously, if you go to the website, there's gassing that you can do, and then your coating. Tell us more about the coating. And if somebody was going to purchase a new home, like if you were going to purchase a new home, what would you be doing? Would you be doing this coating all over that home before you moved in, or how would you utilize that?
Yeah, well, great question, and I can actually use myself because I just moved into a new home.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and it was not in good shape. In fact, I on our Instagram, the Super Stratum Instagram, I'm kind of documenting that process so people can see how I address my own sick building. Now, we can talk a little bit about my own story. I had my own journey with building related illness, particularly with a relationship I was in, someone who got extremely sick
Mm.
while I wasn't as sick, and that's a whole conversation that you alluded to, and it's something that's very important for people to know. But when I really show this journey, we have these people who just can't even believe, right, that I would even attempt to move into this house and to fix it up. But I think there's two ways, let's put it into two buckets. This is when you're building a house and when you're moving into a home that's already built. When you're building a home, our coating is used as a treatment, pre-treatment to that home. So all the studs, the drywall, so often homes are inoculated with mold before they're even put under dry. Those trusses sit on the job site, they sit in the mud, they get rained on, they grow mold, and they just put that wood right up and they close up those wall cavities. Well, it takes weeks for all that moisture in that building to move out of those building materials, the paints and the woods. So you've got inoculated wood, you've got moisture. Most builders don't understand um, things like relative humidity and the consequences when you don't get that right in a crawl space, you're not building correctly. So we see these days a lot of contractors have mold remediators basically as subcontractors because they have to remediate the homes before people even move into them. So when you're building a home, we have an incredible solution. The coating that we have can resist mold for 20 years. We tell people 10 years is what it says on the products, but it really lasts for over 20 years back in a stud cavity like that. That's water resistant. It can get rained on. It can flood over and over, and you're still going to be protected. That coating's going to be protected. So that, if you're starting from the ground up, what I like to tell people is it's at this point, we have a solution for that. We can give you that insurance. So that's what I would do is I would build a house. I would coat all the studs, all the trusses when they got to the job site, and I would even coat the drywall so that even if you had a leak, you wouldn't have that. We just had one of our customers, one of our professional customers, a couple of weeks ago call us, and they did a remediation job a couple of years ago. They thought they fixed the leak behind the wall, and they sprayed the coating, kind of as that final uh, measure in their job. Well, that leak continued for 2 more years, and they got called back. And when they opened up that wall, there was no mold growing, where that coating was. So that's the kind of performance that coating will give you in the built environment. Now, if you're looking, like in my case, I moved into a home that I'm renting. I don't own this home, so there's certain limitations. The first thing I did was I cleaned the ductwork. That's what everyone should do. Most of I would say half of the problems we see develop in the ductwork. Either there's condensation issues in the line, you have mold growing on the coils, and you can imagine how dangerous that is when every bit of air that you're breathing at home is basically passing over a mycotoxin machine. It's just generating that into the air. So clean the ductwork. Where I'm using the coating specifically is in the crawl space. There are some moisture issues in the basement of this home, some drainage issues that the building owner was really not able to fix. That can be very expensive when you actually have waterproofing issues. So a lot of people are stuck in these situations where they're like, I can't stop the water from coming in, or I've got mold. And you really just forget about that. You're like, well, I don't go down there. Or, yeah, it's a little musty down there, but 70% of the air you breathe is coming up from that crawl space in that basement, right? So even though you can't smell it, that's still toxic air and it's important to address. So the way I'm using the coating in this case is I'm spraying it all over the crawl space, the insulation, the floors, the joist, the concrete, anywhere where that moisture accumulates, where mold can grow. It will put down that a long-term coating, on that space. So there's lots of ways you can use that. You can put it, I also put it directly into the HVAC system. So I coated all the ductwork, coated the coils. That will last for years. So even if you start to get moisture back there, you're not going to get any mold growth. So there are many ways you can use the coating. You can even put it on your clothing. I put it on my clothing, and it prevents odors and mold from growing. So yeah, there's lots of ways that you can use that.
Do you feel, I mean, I'm sure best practice is to have a remediation done before using the coating, but
Yep.
if someone were to like, could you just put it over things that may already have an issue and it kind of like traps it in there?
That's a great question. So, of course, we always, the instructions say clean that surface first, put the coating down.
Yep.
So the coating, it's not a cleaner, it's not a disinfectant, right? You want to get that surface clean. So, and that's usually pretty easy to do, right? If you have access to the surface, you can do that. But the way the coating works, it is made from a very non-toxic polymer, and it has preservatives in it. These are not typically used within the mold remediation space because they're just not strong enough. They're mostly used as in-can preservatives. They've been used in cosmetics and shampoos and things like that. But these two components have a very unique relationship. So that polymer creates an invisible, breathable, right? And that's very, very important because some other mold-resistant paints out there, they're paints, right? They seal the wood. You can't put that on structural wood because that will actually trap moisture in,
Mm,
which can create dry rot and things like that, compromise the structure. So this can be applied to structural wood, but even if there's a mold spore, down in that wood, that coating, it really works on both ways. So it's not going to let anything grow through the coating. It's going to protect the coating on the underside, and it's going to protect it on the top side as well.
got it. Okay. And so cleaning the surface area, and there is not the fear that once you do that, you're then releasing potentially mycotoxins into the air and then putting the sealant on it. The concept is okay, yes, clean the area, put the sealant so that now moving forward, it's protected. And anything that's potentially now in the air, we have air purifiers, we have, those types of things that help to kind of filter whatever was left behind ultimately.
Great question. So our coating, was our first product. That was the technology that started our company.
Yep.
But what we realized is, okay, that's a fantastic solution, right? But it's not the entirety of the solution because you have contaminated buildings. And that's when we really went to work to build what is now our Super Stratum whole home system. And this involves, it's a 3-phase cleaning system that involves all three of our products. So we have our HEHOCl cleaners, and I'll talk a little bit about that chemical and how those work. That we use in phase one. We have our superstratum deodor bombs. Those are the chlorine dioxide gas packets. And then we have our coating in the third phase. So what you would typically do is, and this can be done either if you're cleaning the molds yourself, if you've got a small problem and you're cleaning that mold, or if you've had a large remediation job done in your home. And we always tell people, you have to remove mold from the home, right? And this is becoming fairly well known now. People know you can't just fog a chemical into a building to take care of the mold, right? You have to remove that mold. That is important. And you can go, all sorts of things that you can read about and learn about and all different types of opinions. But you want to remove the mold first. Proper remediation is important.
Mhm.
Then you want to perform the superstratum whole home system. This is the building envelope detoxification process. So the way that works is in the first phase, you take our product we call our building cleaner. This is a hypotonic electrolytic hypochlorous acid. So it's a very particular type of HOCl, and there's a lot of HOCl in the market now, but this is unique. We have done specific testing to demonstrate that this product will destroy mycotoxins, but it's also generated within your body. So you don't have sensitivities to it. It's extremely safe. You don't need PPE. In fact, this chemical is being studied cancer research. It has been shown cell regeneration. I mean, I fog it myself and I go stand in the fog and breathe it in. I use it in all sorts of other applications as well. But that just tells you how safe this chemical is in this process for cleaning. So
Sounds
you
like
fog that into the
yeah.
building. What was that?
Sounds like it's going to be banned soon. Too.
Maybe so. Maybe so. So you fog that chemical first, and then you do a small particle clean. You wipe down every surface in the home, all the contents and the items. with the building cleaner. And then the second phase is the gassing. So we take our Super Stratum deodor bombs, they're placed around the home. Each one has a different cubic, volumetric area that it will cover. And we've got a great spot on our website where people can go and enter in all the details of their home, and it tells them how much product they need, where to put it all. So that really helps them, because this is a very custom solution. So you put those around the room, you add water, and it creates chlorine dioxide gas. That chlorine dioxide gas will then fill up that building envelope. It penetrates all those areas that you don't have access to. It destroys not just the mycotoxins, but VOCs, all these other chemical contaminants that can exist in new homes, old homes. So it knocks that out. That happens overnight, right, in the second phase. And then you come back in the third phase, you open up the home, you air out that gas, and then you apply the coating around the windows and the ductwork and all the places where moisture may accumulate. So we designed this solution to be DIY, right? We wanted to create affordable solutions put directly into the hands of people who need it. But also we have professional customers. We do professional cleaning jobs ourselves. In fact, I'm excited. This next year, we're actually launching a franchise cleaning business that is specifically going to be focused on this type of cleaning, because many times people can't do it themselves, right?
Yeah,
But
which
that is the
you don't
system.
do a good job.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, you have a very large business opportunity here for people that are either lazy or they are nervous that they're not gonna do it properly.
yeah. Or too sick. In
Yeah,
many cases, they're so overwhelmed, they're so sick, or they have a 5,000 square foot home. So yeah, we do offer that. We do offer
yeah,
that service professionally.
yeah.
Yeah. But again, the Superstratum whole home system is meant as a detoxification protocol, so process. So it's meant to be done after mold remediation, or when your home just starts to build up with those odors and smells, or it's making you sick. You don't think you have a big moisture issue or a big mold issue. But it's really a new category of cleaning, right? This is not something that most people are aware of. We clean every once in a while, but we just don't understand the consequences when we don't keep our home pure. It can have far-reaching consequences, not just for our health, but like you alluded to, the interpersonal conflict that it can create when, in most cases, it's women, because women are more disposed to this. They're more vulnerable. They spend more time in the home. There are hormone issues. These toxins are endocrine disruptors. They just decimate the reproductive system in women. And you have a husband who's fine, right? And this was in my case, in my experience. I had some symptoms, but my partner was extremely sick, extremely. And I did the best I could. I tried. I mean, I took care of her. I took her to the doctors. It was just this constant cycle. But eventually, you don't know what to do. You don't know if that person, if they're making it up, even if you want to show up for them. And then in cases where people don't even, where they don't believe you, right? Or where gaslighting is happening, it makes it so extremely difficult for someone in that situation. So the consequences of this it's hard to overstate. It's hard to overstate, because it infiltrates every aspect of life, from your kids and the way that they develop and the way that they can learn and go to school, the way they form relationships, to your own mental health. I mean, these cross the blood-brain barrier, right? They attack, they create neuronal inflammation. So if you have TBI or you have trauma, right? A lot of people don't realize the experience of toxicity in a building is often your childhood trauma, right? It's the resurgence of anxiety or OCD or depression or dissociative states. These are things that can be caused and amplified by toxins in your environment.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned earlier too, just in terms of dust, right? So people will say like, okay, I don't see any mold, I don't smell any mold, right? Whereas other individuals know, oh yeah, that's musty and I've seen things or whatnot. But just things settling in the dust I've had that show up recently on some total tox reports that, this is generally odorless and colorless and mostly found in dust particles. Um, I want to go back to the duct system. So, can you tell us exactly, like we're getting ready to clean our ducts again? I know that this is supposed to be done, I believe some people say annually. So I have the guy come, let's say air doctor, no, air duct, whatever, Dr. Duct, excuse me. Like, who are the people? What's his name? Dr. Duct. So let's say they're coming and they're going to clean my ducts. What would I do? Would I say, hey, while you're doing that, I want you to also put this endurance coating in there and blow it throughout or pull it through? Or how would I kind of prepare for that to get the coating into the whole duct system?
Yeah. So a lot of duct cleaners will do some type of sanitation. A lot of times they'll use botanicals or certain things. So our building cleaner can be a replacement for that.
Mhm.
And they usually have the equipment to do that, or they use some type of, sanitization. They have some type of sanitization process that they do. So the building cleaner is great for that. In regards to the endurance coating, yes, I put it all throughout my ductwork. Now, some companies don't have the equipment to spray through a duct line. Some do. So if they have that equipment, it's very simple. They can just pour it right on their machine and they can spray it right in. You can put it directly onto the coils as well. So that's something that any duct cleaner can do because they're going to have access to the coils. So once those coils get clean, you can apply it. But we have a great technical support team as well. We have lots of professionals who we work with. So if there are people out there who are like, "Oh, I want to use these products," or "I'm getting my ducts cleaned," you're welcome to connect, your professional to our team, and we can work with them specifically.
Perfect. Yeah, because I think a lot of this, it can be really overwhelming for people, right? And so we talk a lot about control the controllables. I think that I've worked in the past, just with some new products, micro balance,
Mhm.
just getting started with some of their stuff for like oh gosh, I've used it in their laundry additive, and my washing machine just to kind of clean that. And then they have a spray. It's not like yours in terms of, what you have with this, coating, but as more preventative, right? So, for example, we saw, okay, there's mold in the shower because mold grows in dark, moist places, right? I need to clean that. And then after every shower, just kind of spraying it, down. So, can you speak to little things like that, right? Like where this commonly grows, would you use the cleaner first, like in some of these appliances, and then would you also be able to use the endurance coating in some of those appliances as well, or just the cleaning solution?
Definitely. So, and people ask us this a lot. Our building cleaner can be used as a laundry additive. So you can add about 3/4 of a cup into the bleach tray. In fact, we're launching a laundry product in a
Okay.
couple of months as well, because that's very, very common. And something we didn't talk about, we have content cleaning protocols. So it has been common practice to just trash everything, right? When it's like a fire, you lose all of your belongings. That's not the case anymore. We can help people save their belongings. And so we have a great contents cleaning guide, a great blog on our website. You can download that. It kind of walks you through how to save your belongings. But when it comes to things like laundry and your appliances, and really the ongoing maintenance of your environment, what we like to tell people is the Super Stratum whole home system is triage, right? You're performing that because your building is toxic. But once you get that building to a healthy space, then you can maintain that environment with the right practices and tools going forward. So those ongoing methods are using our everyday cleaner, which is an everyday version of the building cleaner. I use that everywhere. It's all around my house. It's basically the only cleaning chemical that I use. So that is very effective to do. The endurance coating, you can put it right in your shower. It'll last for 10 or so weeks and resist growth. So, saves you a lot of time on those places that you're just constantly cleaning. It can also be used outside. It's fantastic on outdoor furniture or your stone, walkway, any of those places that grow mold and algae. This is a great solution for that. And it'll last about 2 years, right, on the outside of the home in those weather conditions. So yes, you can use those products in the laundry specifically to clean the. You can clean with it. The endurance coating is good around the rim, of your washer. You can clean with the building cleaner or the everyday cleaner around that rim and put that coating on. Now, the performance on the coating is really going to depend on two things: abrasion and moisture. So, if it's getting lots of abrasion, it may only last for a few weeks. if it's getting, like a shower, right?
Mm.
Multiple showers a day, it's going to last for a couple of months before you need to reapply it. But it's in those environments that don't get as much moisture where you get, the years and years of performance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's affordable too. I mean,
Yeah.
just looking at the
I'm looking
website.
at the, I mean, like $12.95 for a cleaner. That's what you pay at Target for most cleaners. And, I love that it's affordable because when it comes to mold and mycotoxins, I feel that everything is extremely expensive. And again, makes it just more overwhelming for the
Yeah.
person that's trying to deal with it. And everyday cleaner, I go through that stuff a lot. And so I just need to replace because I hate cleaning. So my husband cleans, or our cleaning lady cleans. And so I will just be replacing the products with these things to make sure that, we're able to prevent a lot of that. Because I think a big part of why this has become such an issue, like you said, and hopefully everyone heard that and listened to that in terms of how we build today is so much different than how we built, you know, 50 years ago. Because people are like, oh, mold's been around. It's not like, it's just people are trying to find problems to, worry about and reasons for people having all of these sicknesses. And it's like, no, there has been a very clear structural change to how things are built today. And in turn, what we are experiencing now as a society, especially in the United States, and how buildings are made and how new construction and I almost look at new construction as like a red flag now for mold versus oh, you don't have to worry about it, it's new, right? No, it's probably a bigger problem that it's new, like and it's
Yeah.
creating a lot of these problems. So we've talked a little bit about it before, but I would love for you to kind of discuss like what are signs, symptoms that people can look for, right? Maybe personally that they're dealing with or in the home, what to look out for to see like maybe this is a problem for you and something that, needs to be addressed.
Yeah. So I'll break it up into two buckets. Talk about the home first. There are really three ways that mold grows in a home. One is the common way that we all know: you get a leak behind a wall, a flood. There's a hidden moisture issue, and that can be very problematic because those can persist for a long time before you recognize, before you pay attention to it. Now, that can be very dangerous, of course, but it's not the most dangerous because a lot of times that mold is contained in a cavity, right? So those toxins and spores may be seeping out, and maybe that exposure happens over a long accumulation of time. But that's the first way. The second way is in the crawl space or the basement, right? Like we talked about. You've got drainage issues. You've got moisture in that environment. It's growing and creating toxins, and then that's the stack effect. The pressure in the house is pushing that air up into the home. And then the third way is, of course, the HVAC system. So those are the three areas you want to watch out for. So any kind of water damage, paint bubbling, corrosion around windows, just anything, even just a small little drip out of your dishwasher, right? You just don't think about these things, but over time, that seeps into the subfloor and seeps under your vinyl flooring, and now there's mold growing all under there. So you want to pay attention to water damage in your home. Do not ignore it. Do not ignore it. It do not ignore it. I'll just say it again and again and again. It is the most important thing you can do for your family's health is to make sure that you are, um, addressing the water damage in your home. So those are the things you can look out for that. Like I said, you want to clean your HVAC systems, address it in your basement, but it's fairly straightforward when you're talking about your home. Now, there's no substitution for a great environmentalist, getting someone out there who not just understands, who can test for mold, but who actually understands building science, who knows what causes these issues. And one very common issue that I'll talk a little bit about because I think it's worth mentioning in the HVAC system. It's very common these days for HVAC systems to be oversized for a home. Now, we typically think, okay, well, if you have an oversized unit, well, that's good, right? Because I've got more power. But there's a problem because the HVAC system has two purposes. One is to condition the air, to heat it or cool it. But the second purpose is to dehumidify the air. So what happens when your system is oversized, and you'll notice this in homes where it flips on and then it just freezes everything down, it gets real cold, and then it shuts off. So it doesn't run for very long. And it'll get cool, and then it turns off, and it kind of gets hot again. Well, when that happens and the condenser shuts off, now it's not dehumidifying the air. So even if that fan is still rolling, you create humidity issues because you don't have it running long enough. You would have to crank the air down to 63 or to have it run long enough to dehumidify the air. So that's very important, and that's a systemic problem, and it can be difficult to fix if you have an oversized unit. You may need to bring in some dehumidifiers in order to keep that humidity at around 50%. That's ideal. You want it to be around 50%.
Do you recommend, like we've always said, have dehumidifiers in the basement always, and ours is right outside of the HVAC room, whatever. Do you recommend other areas of the house as well, like bathrooms or other
Yeah.
places?
Yeah, anywhere that you have humidity issues, and you can buy hygrometers. They're very cheap. I put them in all the rooms, and I walk in and say, oh, it's 60% humidity, or it's 50, or it's 30%. It's very easy to check and see what your humidity is, and you know it too, right? You can tell when it's humid. So yes, sometimes if you've got areas that don't have good ventilation, if you have an oversized unit, it's great to use dehumidifiers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
What about HVACs that are maybe too small for the house?
well, they will run constantly, right? So they're going to continue to dehumidify. You may not be able to control the temperature, right,
Mhm.
as much. So that's also an issue. But it's a bigger issue to have an oversized unit because you're going to have that moisture rise, and it'll contribute to just that overall ickiness in your house.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. What about space heaters? Do you find that they worsen things because they like create more heat slash than humidity, or is it just such a small?
Well, typically you're going to run a space heater in the winter when it's going to be, the air is going to be much less humid. So you're not really battling the same humidity issues, when you're dealing with space heaters and those types of things.
It's probably a me problem. I
Yeah.
I am the like turn the AC on, but give me a space heater next to me.
Yeah, I run pretty cold too.
Okay, and then I know we've obviously done mold podcasts before, and like symptoms can be really hard because it can be so many things. It's like when you can't pinpoint what's going on, look to mold type thing because it could be literally every symptom in the book. But do you find there are specific, top 5, top 10 that you're like, yeah, we probably want to look at mold?
Yeah, definitely. So it's usually a combination, right? Because and this is a whole I love this topic. I could talk about it for hours. But when we think about disease and illness, we typically think, oh, there's a cause and an effect, right? The cause is this, the effect is this disease or this illness, right? But that's not exactly how it works, because all disease comes from a toxin in the environment, a bacteria, a mold, a parasite, a toxin, right? It creates a deficiency in the body. It takes something from the cell that the cell needs. The cell then adapts to survive in that toxic environment. And if it can't get out of the toxic environment, remove the toxin, then when it reproduces, the memory of that adaptation gets encoded into the DNA in a mutation. And the mutation causes the symptom. That's the progression of illness. Well, you go to a doctor and they're going to treat the symptom, right? Even a lot of functional medicine is really just supplementing the deficiency, right? It all starts with the environment. You have to address the environment first. So, what happens when you're in this environment and you start to create this inflammation is you get a cascade of symptoms. So, you normally see clusters of symptoms, and because of people's individual genetics, because of their previous exposures, it always manifests differently. The most common things that I see, and I've dealt with hundreds, of these cases over the years. Chronic fatigue, of course, the biggest. Brain fog, is one of the easiest. There was one study that showed that 93% of all people who had chronic fatigue syndrome had at least one mycotoxin in their system, right? And if you look at chronic fatigue syndrome, it didn't even exist until the early 90s, right? So we'll put that to the side. But chronic fatigue, brain fog, those are big ones. Those are the easiest ones. Gut issues, some of the most common. Colitis, IBS, anything leaky gut, food allergies. We don't associate these things with toxicity, what I like to tell people is I see all of these people who they get very sick and they go on this health journey and then they change their diet, right? And they say, "Oh, now I just eat meat and I healed myself," or I did it. And what I want to tell them is like, no, 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 you you didn't heal yourself. Like you just eliminated all of the inflammation, all of the things that are causing the inflammation in your body. If you were healed, you would be able to eat all of those things, right? There is a deeper root cause than your diet. Diet is important. There may be, other than our lived environments, there's probably nothing more important than our diet. But our but when you're talking about toxicity in buildings and especially gut issues, it's not a diet issue, right? There's a toxin. So I see that, and I've seen some cases where I've dealt with people who have been so sick they've been going to the ER. They've had hospitals say they need to remove their colons, like just the most insane things you've heard. And I'll take them and pluck them out of that environment within 48 hours. They're back on a full diet. Their symptoms are gone, right?
Mm.
Sometimes you don't even have to do anything except
Yeah.
get out of the environment.
I think it's a
So,
great call. It's one of the things that we always ask if we suspect it is like, do
mhm,
you feel better when you're on vacation? Or do you
that's the
feel better
question.
when you're out of the house for more than a couple of days?
Yep.
The hard thing is that most hotels have mold and, they
Yeah.
aren't always the
But
best.
but when you ask people that question, they almost always know. They just haven't connected this. So, oh well, I just thought it's because I wasn't stressed because I was on vacation. I wasn't away. It's like, well, okay, that's true too, but you're exactly right. You leave that, you perk up, you go back, and it all starts again.
Yeah, there's a
Gut
big difference
issues.
between, being less stressed on vacation and, feeling more relaxed and, maybe a little bit more energy because you're sleeping in and whatever, than like a lot of times, as we've already talked about, the brain fog, the extreme chronic fatigue. And then also I see a lot more in terms of like what I would say histamine or mast cell type
Yes.
reactions, where it's, the itchy, sneezy, watering eyes, all the things. Now, while we're on this topic, and I'm sorry, but we have to bring it up because this is the population that I see it with the most is teachers, because they're working in schools that are not being taken care of. And I was actually talking with my sister, and I have hmm, four of my clients that I'm like, yeah, when you're off on summertime and all these things go away, it's the environment that you're
Mm,
working in. And I know that that's really hard, but I tell them at least get an air purifier in your room. Now, that's not going to probably do much for the mycotoxins, but then now, what would you say to them? Okay, at least cleaning their room with this solution that you have, maybe that everyday cleaner, anything else that you can do or say to these people who are working in, so it could be somebody that works in a hotel, it could be somebody that works in a school, right, or any other building, federal buildings. My brother manages a lot of the Illinois federal buildings, and he's like, "You- I'm a water snob, like I won't drink tap water," and he's like, "I am with you because I see what our pipes look like," right? He's like, "I know how crazy our mold problems are within these buildings, and nobody wants to necessarily disclose it because what's going to happen, right? All these people working in this environment, they're getting sick." So I'd love to know from you what maybe your experience has been with that, or what you've told people to do about this, because obviously that's their living, right? And not everyone is sick, but some of them are really severely sick.
yeah. Yeah. So there are some cases where you're working in an environment, you don't own the house, you can't, I mean, a teacher can't remediate a school, right? But there are things that you can do in that environment. One of the best ways is fogging with our building cleaner. I do it regularly in my home. It is a great way. It knocks dusts out of the air. It drops to the ground. It'll destroy those mycotoxins. It just leaves the air fresh. So that is very affordable to do. You can buy a ULV fogger, what they call an ultra low volume fogger. They're available on Amazon. You can put the building cleaner right in it, just fog it around, wipe up, clean the dust. Big, 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 big issue. Always clean the dust. Dust is where it lives. That's, in fact, symptoms in a building. The number one correlation is dust, right? So you remove that dust, so that's going to make a huge difference. Air purification is great as well. I'll bunny trail a little bit on air purification for a second because there's two types. There's active and passive. Now, passive purification is filtration, right? Air ductors, molecules. Yeah, there's lots of filtration devices. It's sucking the air to the device to filter it out. Now, I like to use the analogy of like a pool, right? Pools have filters too. And we've all seen that leaf that just sits there and spins in the corner of the pool, right? Well, air in the building is the same way. Not all air in the building is going to be able to get to that filter. So there are some limitations when you're talking about passive filtration. Now, active purification is actually when you're sending something out into the environment to purify the air. This is ionization. Now, typical ionizers on the market today are what are called bipolar ionization or needlepoint ionization. That sends out a very weak ion. It's a single electron. Now, ionization happens within nature. Lightning strikes and the electromagnetic currents within the ionosphere. That's what creates these powerful ions that keeps air fresh, right? There is a technology. It's not available commercially to consumers yet, called multi-cluster ionization. This is an ionization technique that is about 10 times more powerful than traditional ionization. I have some of these devices. They are a game changer because what they do is they send ions out into the environment, and that the reason that dust and particles float in the air is because they have an electric charge. It keeps them suspended in the air. So these ions decharge those particles and they fall to the ground. So they purify the air by taking the charge out of dust particles so that then you can just clean them up in your normal cleaning protocol. So we're actually right now developing a multi-cluster ionization air purifier that I hope we will launch this year. We'll certainly let you guys know. But air purification, in any sense, passive or active, is a good thing to do in that environment. So it's there, even if you can't go all of the way, just getting on a regular cleaning schedule, fogging and wiping down, using the coating. I mean, the coating would be a great example. You could spray that into the ductwork, around the windows. If you know where that problem is, you can address it in that environment and really try and just create that bubble, of protection.
Makes sense.
So, to kind of round us out, what would be your number one piece of advice if, they suspect this? Or sometimes what we'll ask people is, if you could scream one thing from the mountaintops to everyone listening, what would that be?
Well, address the water damage in your home and clean. You know, I I guess this is a great way to wrap up. I like to tell people a lot of times that if I grew up religious, right, and I read the Bible, and when you read the Bible or these other religious texts, there are all these cleaning rituals, right, and they seem so funny to us now. Like, why is it important? Why does God want you to clean, right? Well, it's because this is a temple, just like this is a temple, right? And when you don't keep this temple clean, then this temple gets compromised because toxins and molds, when they enter into your space, they don't just disrupt your physical body. They disrupt the subtle energy body. They disrupt the higher frequency energy bodies that make up who you are, which disrupts your mental health, your spiritual health. We fall out of alignment with God, with our environment, with in our relationships. So this was one of the most important things to understand for ancient people. It's that there are mold protocols in Leviticus, right? The Bible told people how to handle mold, and it was because they knew this. Our problem today is not that mold has somehow decided to attack us, right? Or we've somehow decided to attack mold. It's that we're out of right relationship with our environments. We have a relationship problem. We're not we're not living right is the simplest way to put it. And so kind of, I guess I would say, like, implementing these things into our lives, right? Ritualize your cleaning, ritualize it with your family, like create this discipline, get everyone involved in this, because there's nothing that's more important for your health, for your family's health, for your spirituality, for your family spirituality, for your relationships with one another. Nothing affects those more than the environment that you live in.
I love that. So where can people find you, find Superstratum? How can they get started? Give them a rundown on where to go.
Great. So our website is superstratum.co. And I'll put a link in the show notes. So I'll give you guys that has a discount for people. They can go enter in their email address and get a discount code for our products. And on our website, people can find information about the whole home system. We've got great instructional videos, walk people through how to do it. You can read all about our products. You can get deep into the chemistry. We've got different blogs that talk about our different protocols, walk you through the whole home system. So our website is the best resource. We also have our order wizard there. You can create a custom order for your home. So if you want to detoxify your whole home, you get in, create a profile, enter in all the rooms of your home, and it'll tell you exactly how much product that you need. And then we'll give you instructions on how to do that. On
Awesome.
social media, we're on Instagram, we're superstratum.co, or superstratum.co. And then on TikTok, we're superstratum. And then if people want to follow me personally, I'm Seth H _ Jones. I share some different things there. But we're really trying to create, a vibrant community of people who are looking for these safe, non-toxic solutions that don't make them more sick and that can address toxins within their home.
I love it. I think it's going to be really valuable. We have a definitely a big population that is very aware of mold and mycotoxins and the damage that they can cause. And I think this is going to be very helpful for everyone that listens. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing the knowledge and what you have that can help so many people.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was a great conversation.